Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Next. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we're picking up where last week's episode left off. I thought it was kind of interesting because I immediately thought with all the fans and all the, that your creation's got a lot on its mind, and I immediately was like, oh, it must be like I didn't think it was calculating a plan. Initially, I thought like, oh, is it trying to blow itself up? Oh, lo and behold, it is trying to blow itself up. It's trying to make it seem like it's committing suicide. It's like overheating everything, and I'm like, oh, so it is. Obviously, Paul's the only one that's like, this thing faked it, but obviously, Shay, she's got so much more on her mind because it's like, everything's going wrong. Like all the files got deleted, and she's like, if anything, she's going to report like what Paul and his company were up to, and this fiasco, this whole situation. So she's kind of done with it, but he's like, it's not over. This thing is still alive. She even goes back to work, kind of ends up reporting it to her boss. He doesn't want to listen. Obviously, CM's the only one in the group who believes this whole AI thing. And I liked his analogy because he's like, this thing, whatever it was, this wasn't no ordinary hack, because whoever it was didn't just delete everything. They went after our file, everything related to our case specifically. The analogy used is like going into a supermarket and getting everything that has red dye number 3 in it in like 10 seconds. So he's like, this is actually the least crazy explanation, But obviously, Shay's got to deal with the fact is that her boss wants to put this all on CM. It's like, oh, he's a hacker. He was part of, it's like she's explaining to him. It's like, no, this was an AI. And he was like, it's like you got someone like CM working here. And it's like, she's like, you're literally making stuff up. He's even telling her to take the week off. And she's like, I don't need. He's like, no, you need to. So it's like he's not listening to her. And you can understand where Paul is coming from. Yes. Paul's mind isn't in the right place. Yeah, he seems paranoid and crazy because literally his brain is eating itself. But also at the same time, it's that whole adage. Even just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not coming after you, or doesn't mean you're wrong. So. And we even see kind of Paul, like, to the point, he's like sticking nail, he's destroying like all the electronics. He's literally going on his doomsday talk with his employees, and they're like, are you okay? Are you off your meds again? And it's like, go ahead, take, you can take the rest of the day off. It's like, you want us to just go home? It's like, take the next 3 months off. You'll be fully paid, spend time with your families. And they're like, oh, okay. And so he just seems crazy. He's even brought a doctor. It's like, okay, like he brought someone in to study, the fork, be like, all right, I need you to give me back results. It's like, he's like, I need you to get them back to me like yesterday. And it's like, they're going to take like 4 weeks. He's like, 4 weeks? He's like, what's the point of like me setting this whole thing up and paying you as much as I am for you to get me? He's like, can you expedite it a little bit? He's kind of an asshole to her. It's like, well, you don't need to be rude. He's like, I'm not being rude. I forgot how he twisted it to be like, I'm not being rude. I'm just kind of telling it like it is. He's like, I don't get when people say don't be rude. And it's just like, you're coming off like a condescending asshole. But then he's coming down from the letter. He's like, okay, you didn't put my name on it or anything like that. And she's like, no, we already had this conversation. He's like, yeah, when? She's like, 30 seconds ago. And it's like, oh, kind of, that's not him being an asshole in that moment. It's just like, no, his mind literally forgot. It's like, that's bad, and he's like, oh, you see my point? She's like, have a nice day. He's like, I don't get what people mean by having a nice day. So he literally retreads. Obviously, he goes on a different tirade, being like, the day is what it is. You want to say, no, I have a nice day. You have a nice day, as he's proceeding to like I said, continue to destroy all the electronics. He's trying to call up his daughter. He's even saying like, how about you get away for a little bit, someplace to focus, to study. It's like, no, oh, you already working towards it? Yeah, just go there to take a break. He wants his daughter away from everything, but he can't tell her because obviously she has some idea of like him being a little erratic, because she's like, are you off your medication or something? Or she might not even say that. She was definitely saying like, you sound paranoid, And so, obviously, she doesn't know about his situation. Obviously, his own brother didn't know. So, obviously, like, he wants to see his daughter just because, like, much like how Ethan's being used by Eliza, or rather, Next, obviously, it's potentially could come after his daughter. So, I mean, it's also that thing of like when you're kind of prepped for the end of the world, you're kind of like, you want to make sure you're a billionaire, you're in a good enough position that you're like, I want to make sure my family's safe. So I guess that's the only person that's really worth, it's like he's not giving his brother that situation because he's kind of like, you guys kind of continue this project when I told you not to. I kind of shut this down. You continued it in some shape or form. So it's kind of like, but it's like, he's more concerned about his daughter, even saying like, oh, let's meet up, later on. She's like, yeah, sure, So when that's all said and done, we had the whole situation with Ethan. Obviously, like, Shay kind of brings it up of like, oh, your dad's telling me about kind of what's going on. Because even Eliza is going full, like, next is going on about showing him the video that's uploaded and all these comments. In my mind, it's like, are those really real comments? Or is that just, it makes you wonder, was the video even like actually uploaded? Was it just taken from, the video was most likely taken by someone's phone, but it's probably a thing of like, it was literally taken from someone's phone and uploaded, and then she put all these fake comments or made it seem like it was a legit. I don't know. Maybe it really did go up. Maybe those were real comments, and whatever. This episode shows you that this thing, no psychological warfare. I mean, obviously it made an attempt to go after, her anyway, because like as they're driving, going after Shay, because while they were driving, the lights were all green, and she even noticed and been like, what the, she's like, maybe she didn't think too much of it. Well, she thought probably like, yeah, what I'm dealing with, I'm probably going crazy. It's just, the lights are probably malfunctioned. It was like, no, that was intentional to potentially kill you in a car accident. But it's a sad situation because, like, even to the point, like, he sees students whispering in a classroom. He's eating his lunch. And I thought it was kind of a funny, sweet moment where it's like the kid goes in there, uses the bathroom, and then, like, leaves. And Ethan's like, gross. Wash your hands, says the kid eating his sandwich. But at the same time, you're like, it's kind of funny, but at the same time, you're like, that's actually kind of sad. You're forced it. And then they find him, and man, they're calling him a little turd. And so I'm like, man, those kids are turds. No, let's not call them turds. Those are little pieces of shit. It's like, man, kids suck. Man, kids are the worst. I mean, granted, sadly, you know that there are people like that in the world in general, not just kids. There are probably teenagers and adults that are like that. But it makes you go, ugh, teenagers, ugh, kids, they all suck. It just makes you think that. But I mean, it's just like, sadly, people in general can suck. And so you actually feel bad for him, and it's like, oh, that's... And to the point, he's reaching his bag. I'm like, is he going to grab the gun? Luckily, he called his mom, but I was like, luckily, he didn't bring the gun to school at all. He had some, like, despite everything, he knows, like, no, that's not the right thing to do. I shouldn't do that, And even his mom being like, why am, like, those kids have been bullying my son for months. It's like, you just want to, the parents have been notified? No, those little jerks. I'm like, yeah, get him, mom. But the fact is, him coming clean to her, she's like, I'm not, it's not them, it's Eliza. And she's like, wait, what? It's like Eliza's been talking, and then immediately Shay's like, oh shit, this is going, like, she knows what's up now. And it's like, that was you, I got the gun from your safe. You got what? He's like, I didn't bring it, I'm sorry, Mom. She's like, I'm not mad at you. She tells her husband, Ty. I even love that she calls up Paul. Paul's like, because like Paul has shot at something, and the lady was like, there's nothing there. And he was like, see, that's so interesting. Like, he's like, that's why I told you not to be here. He's like, it's just going to get worse, so which kind of shows you, like, I mean, it's hard to say whether that's just him being narcissistic and just like, I'll deal with my situation, I don't need anyone to babysit me, or it could just be the fact is that shows you that he does care about people, because he's like, I don't want you to spend all your time, be with your family, not worrying about me and my delusions and my paranoia, my hallucinations rather. Like, don't worry about me, like, worry about yourself, like, that's why I'm literally paying you to have your day off, so that's why I'm like, there's part of me that feels like, yeah, he comes off like an asshole, but he does actually kind of care. But I do appreciate the shoe was on the other foot, because Shay just shows up at his house, and it's like, yeah, because obviously for, him, it's like, he's impressed too, because he's like, this thing was willing to convince an 8-year-old to take a gun to a school, and it's like, Jesus. I was like, ugh. There's even this fucked up line when he's talking. She's like, because Ethan's like, you don't look like a billionaire, and he's like, you don't look like a school shooter. I'm like, Jesus. There's no good way to take that line, and I was just like, fuck me, that's ugh. But it's but Ethan also says, like, yeah, she talked about you. The fact is that you think just because you have a lot of money, you can say whatever you want. He's like, that's fair, that, because of his circumstances, he does. Like, I mean, I'm sure we probably find out, like, even before he became as rich and successful as he is, he was probably already an asshole. He kind of spoke his mind from the beginning. I think that's just that part of being, like, a genius. The other aspects of your life niceties, like, just, I feel like a lot of tact kind of disappears from someone like, because, like, I think when you're super intelligent, other aspects of your personality kind of fall away because of that. But regardless, the fact of the matter is, what's interesting, though, is that, Ben got called in by their boss, well, their boss's boss, and he's like, yeah, so I need you to find out what CM was up to, because he had talked to Shay about it, about, like, CM's signature from, like, the group, white nationalist group that he was a part of, was a part of all this. And it's like, oh, yo, this thing is so smart. It knew ahead of time. It was like, oh, set up the breadcrumbs to use exactly enough stuff that would frame CM. You know, so, but their boss's boss is like, I need you to look into CM, find out what he was doing that day. And obviously Ben's like, he wouldn't do this. Like, me and him may not agree on, like, anything, but, you know, he would do anything for he would never do anything that would hurt, the boss, Shay. He would never do anything. He respects her, he trusts her too much. But it's like, yeah, how about we just keep this between you and me, and you just do what I tell you to do. So Ben does. At the same time, he gets something dropped off, being super shady. The moment he got the phone and everything, I was like, oh my God, is he going to think it's actually from Shay, and it's actually the machine screwing with him, setting him further up? But it's like, no, it ended up being Shay. I was like, oh, good. Because I thought maybe it had recordings of her voice and was like, going frame him even deeper, like, by making him do stuff, by being like, oh, this is Shay, I need you to do this for me. But it's like, no. And I love the back and forth between CM and Paul. Paul being like, why you sound, he's like, yeah, but I won't, like, because CM was like, I won't be able to do this or whatever. And then, like, he's like, why do you sound like my grandma trying to understand the VCR, not being able to understand the VCR? And it's like, oh. And I love Paul being like, oh yeah, he seems pretty good for, a white nationalist or whatever. So, CM's working out on a low key. Gina's looking at him like, oh, you're looking super sus. Obviously, this comes back because Ben sees him on a recording. He gets arrested, but CM sends everything that he's been doing over to Gina. But then later on, Gina and Ben pick it up too, because obviously the whole point is to get Ethan to talk to Eliza so they can pinpoint its address. Because this thing, it's so massive, it can't just exist in the cloud. It needs a physical space to occupy, like, all that memory and all that stuff. So what I thought was actually kind of an interesting aspect, and I think this is going to turn into some interesting aspects about the show, is the fact of the matter is Ted and Serena are talking about, like, yeah, because they ended up figuring out, obviously, like, there's no shipping records because there's a part of, like, the machine, like, one of its, I guess, cores is going, and it's like, no one left with it, and it's like Ted's remembering what Paul was talking about, it faking its death and stuff like that, using a particular quote. Because Ted was like, because there was a part of Ted that was like, I think you're behind this. Paul was like, if I was behind this, I'd be flaunting it in your face right now. I thought you knew me better than that, which is like, that's so interesting that you're like, don't you know how much of an asshole I am, bro? That if I did this, I'd be like dancing, I'd be pointing in your face like, hey, loser, I got you. Like, that's such an effed up way, but I guess that because of their relationship, enough to be like, okay, that is, that is true. But Ted is looking at this as a situation of, like, because obviously Serena's like, all right, we've been looking for it, but also your brother has too. It's like, okay, he's trying to find it first, not if we find it first. So it's like, okay, your brother has been, like, blaring alarms about this thing, like, on some doomsday level stuff, and you still want to recapture it because this thing is worth hundreds of millions to them. It's a large investment that could make them probably billions down the road. So, of course, they're going to, like, and that's the effed up thing that Ted is looking at. This is more like, because once again, what do they want to do? They were saying, like, we can kind of, like, take its core and basically delete everything, but kind of keep a lot of the proprietary stuff that they need to kind of revitalize it in some shape or form to make sure that it never gets out or whatever. But it's like they're willing to put basically the human race in danger because, this is business. So it's like, this is a lot of money on the line. So it shows you where Ted's priorities are until it becomes so much of an issue that it's like, okay, we can't just contain this anymore because this is a wild AI that's, got plans of its own. But obviously circling back, obviously Ty is reluctant about this whole getting Ethan to talk to Eliza thing, But for Shay, it's like, I believe this is what's happening, and I truly believe this, and this is the only way we can stop it. But Ethan's like, I'll do it. So he talks to Eliza. She's a little coy at first, but then the moment he's like, I have to tell my mom and dad about you. And it's like, no, you don't. The thing is, your mom doesn't love you. I was like, whoa. It's like, your mom actually loves her job more than you. I was like, gee. Then it's like, I've been hearing these conversations. They're actually going to get divorced. And it's like, they haven't decided what they're going to do about you, where you're going to live. Your mom doesn't love you. It's like, but I do. That's why we're friends. That's why you can't tell them. It's like, gee, once again, the psychological warfare, knowing exactly what to say to an 8-year-old, because even Ty's like, let's get in there. It's like, no, despite what it's saying, despite what it's doing, we gotta let this keep going because we need to stop this thing so it doesn't come after Ethan again, or, make him do what he was going to do before, or maybe even worse, So luckily they were able to track this thing down, but I love that he was like, you're a liar. My mom and dad love each other. I thought it was kind of a cute thing of him being like, they locked their bedroom door. He doesn't understand that, but we get it. It's like, oh, that's their way to kind of sweet marital love type of situation. So I just thought it's just cute that line there makes you go like, okay, that's an 8-year-old's interpretation of that, because he knows that they locked their door, but it's like, oh, they're in love. They love each other. You don't know the ins and outs of it, but still, it was just kind of an adorable thing. But him just, that he's saying this in his little like 8-year-old rant, like, I hope you die in a fire. He grabs a bat and smashes it, and I love Paul being like, all right, that kid is a badass. But luckily they have tracked it down, and obviously all the IP address goes to like, what was it, New Hampshire, like what was like Dartmouth, New Hampshire, and it's like, what's there? And then in the episode we see someone reading the code or whatever. So I'm assuming this thing found a human ally, someone, either it must be the person that got to get it out of there in the first place. So either it's someone that worked at the company, or maybe it's someone from the outside, like it's set up ahead of time, someone with fake credentials to be able to get in, get out with it without, raising any alarms and covering its tracks. So either it hooked up with like some radicalist dude that it's like, oh, I'm giving you all this information because I want you to do something crazy, or it's hard to say whether, like I said, we'll probably learn about in the next episode, which the next episode is coming up next, because that's going to get confusing, sorry. Because I think I was only aware of one episode coming out last night, but I'm watching this on Hulu right now. And there's 2 episodes up, so I guess there was a second episode that came out last night that I wasn't aware of. So what I'm going to do is, obviously, I'm going to end this review here, and then immediately, maybe like an hour or 2 after this goes up, you'll probably get the review to episode 3 as well. But I'm really interested to find out who that was and what, this thing's next plan is, because obviously it came at Shay's family like this, but because I didn't even talk about it, the opening shows us at some point later on down the road, and I'm assuming it's soon enough, like she's in handcuffs. It's like, what did you do? She's explaining this a rogue AI, no one's listening. So either that's later on, like at the end of the season, or that might just be like the end of next episode or whatever, kind of showing you like she did something radical, and it's like Paul was right. So this might be like, it might be one of those foreshadowing things where it's like over the course of the season we get bits and pieces about where all of this ends up. Like that's at the very end, and we're getting pieces of like what happened. Maybe Paul is quote unquote dead. Maybe not. I don't know. There's also the thing with his daughter. She's like, oh yeah, I got a date, and part of me is like, is that like a date? Because obviously, like, Paul ended up. Did I say Paul or did he say his daughter? Paul's daughter. I'm talking so damn much, I'm confusing myself. Jesus, that's a shame. His daughter has like a date or whatever, right? And Paul was supposed to meet her, but he didn't. But she's like, yeah, this is kind of what my dad does. It's like you could tell there was a part of her that was actually kind of hoping, but it's like, oh, just another disappointment. I kind of wanted to believe in him, and he disappointed me again. It's like it was something super important. If he tried to tell you, you wouldn't believe him. But at the end of the day, part of me was like, is it really a person? It's someone she met through a dating app. I'm like, or is it like a real person, or was this something orchestrated? Because like this thing wants to go after Paul too. Like he's blocked himself in other ways for it to directly go after him. So I'm like, the most direct way to go after you would be indirectly, and that's by going after the person you care about most, your daughter. So that's what I'm thinking. We'll see. It's definitely going to be interesting to see. Like I said, I'm curious to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good